Please don't label my contacts with you as harmful. If you think that's an appropriate term for our conversation, then it is very likely that we should sunset our association promptly.
What does this mean? Am I getting fired? Is my career over? My career? What do I do? What do I do? What do I say?
Have you ever learned something about yourself or had a revelation that completely altered your entire life forever? Like finding out you're gay or getting a new diagnosis from your doctor or new diagnosis from your doctor or finding out that you were adopted? What did you do with that information? Like, what did you do next? I was diagnosed with autism at 30 years old, shortly before I was tossed off of the career path I had been working towards for 15 years. And that experience was quite traumatic in hindsight. And it's taken me about 6 months to put this video together because of that. But also, I think it's really important to share stories like this in case you can relate and you can feel validated, or you're just nosy and want to know why I got fired for being autistic or how I got fired for being autistic, because as we all know, that's illegal. So anyway, please tune in to my short story time, my story time of how I got fired for being autistic. Hey babes, welcome to my channel. My name is Diamond and I'm here to tell you a story. This video is separated into 3 main parts, with each having 3 subparts, starting with the main story of how I got fired, and introduction of myself and introduction of my channel. Please refer to the timestamps if you're just here for the tea. Now let's get into it. Like many neurovarying kids, I was designated as gifted at a very early age. I'm guessing around 3rd grade? I don't know. And I followed that trajectory up through high school, where I took a bunch of AP classes and stuff. But one that stood out specifically was chemistry, where I had a Black woman teacher. And after our enemies to friends arc, I was really inspired by her career path and what she did to become a chemistry teacher. #representation. I decided in junior year of high school that I wanted to be a professor of chemistry. I wanted to teach chemistry in the college level, mostly because I don't think I have the patience for any age group that's much younger. Shout out to all the early childhood and K through 12 teachers. It could not be me, but bless your souls. Anyways, after high school, I went to college, and that's where I learned that you need a PhD or a higher education degree of some sort to be a professor in general. So that's what I did over the next 9 years. And like most, if not all, high masking autistic people, I had a really tough time in academia and getting these degrees. And I can go into more details about being autistic in academia in a later video, so you let me know. But here's the cliff notes of some of the things I struggled with. So I got the 4-year undergraduate degree in chemistry, and then 5.5 years later, in December of 2021, I earned my PhD. I walked across that stage and they handed me that blank piece of paper, and it was the biggest accomplishment of my life at that time. I had spent more than half of my life working towards that degree, and it meant nothing to me. I felt the most empty I'd ever felt in my entire life. And after that, I moved in with my mom and my new stepdad at the time, and was ready to celebrate my first Christmas and New Year's as Dr. Diamond. And unfortunately, someone had different plans for me. Those someones are she who must not be named, and my graduate advisor, who thought it would be a really good idea for me to set up myself for the next stage of my career path, which is applying for a postdoctoral fellowship. So, over the 2 weeks where I had COVID and I missed Christmas and New Year's, I wrote a 10-page proposal that outlined 3 years of research and broader impacts and outreach, and submitted that to the with my sponsoring scientist, who, spoiler alert, is the boss that fired me 2.5 years into a 3-year fellowship. But I digress. We'll get to that shortly. So after working day and night tirelessly over this very long proposal, I submitted it and got the fellowship. Whoa. It was crazy. It was super prestigious, and it was huge. It was the next stage in my career. It's one step forward to what I needed to do. And I was so excited to move to a big city and work at an Ivy League school. This was going to do huge things for my career. Unfortunately, little did I know, this time moving away from home was going to break me in ways I could never have fathomed. So we got the submission in time, and after that submission, I spent the next 3 months in the deepest, darkest depression I had ever experienced in my life. Now, today, in hindsight, we would definitely call that burnout. But being back home and around friends and family, and after accomplishing such a huge milestone, I really had to put on a brave face, and so I tried. But before we get into that, I want to provide a little bit of context. So for those of you who don't know, the path from going from weirdly ambitious high school student to professor of chemistry is quite treacherous and not so well known. As of 2021, of all the people that live in the US, about 2% of them have PhDs. Now that is like 5 million people, but unless you're in academia, I may teach you something right now. I'm going to break down the 5 easy steps to getting your PhD. 1, get your high school diploma. 2, go to undergrad and do some research and get that undergraduate degree in a field that's similar to the PhD field you want to get into. 3, go to grad school, get the PhD. 4, after you've gotten your PhD, you probably want to do a postdoc or some sort of postdoctoral activities. This is for a professorship. You'll probably want to get some more teaching experience or some different research experience. And number 5, apply to be a professor. That's it. So at this part of the story and at this part of my life, I'm currently on step 4 out of 5. I'm in the postdoc era. So I moved to a new city for the 3rd time since I left home after high school, and was urged by my sponsoring scientist, the boss in question, had urged me to begin as soon as possible so that there isn't a gap in my CV. Now, it had only been 4 months since I got my PhD. First red flag. Right. Okay. So I spent the first couple of months of my fellowship trying to get back into the groove of research. Granted, it hadn't been that long, but when you don't use it, you lose it, right? So getting back into the groove of research, I didn't come from an Ivy League undergrad or graduate school, so a lot of the grad students seemed to be a lot further ahead than I was. So I was trying to catch up a lot to the other members in my research lab for a large part of the beginning. But going in, me and my sponsoring scientists knew that one of my largest deficits was conducting and completing research projects. Now, I do have 5 published papers, one of them being I'm the first author. However, that isn't the same when you actually are in it. So we both knew that that was going to be an issue for me. But what we didn't know was going to be an issue, that it was going to be harder and harder for me to come into work every day, for me to go into the lab. And by lab, I mean computer lab. I do computational research, so everything I do is on the computer. So I can do it from home if I really need to. But even then, even if I'm able to work at my home office, I started to feel like I didn't know chemistry at all. I was feeling really depressed and unmotivated and having a lot of brain fog. And I was also starting to see a therapist again and taking medications for depression again. And none of that was working. My usual coping skills were not working. And I really didn't know what was going on. Eventually, in April of 2023, right after my Saturn return just started, if you know, you know, my body stopped working. What occurred over the next 9 months was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I was completely breaking down, not eating or sleeping or working, or I was overeating and oversleeping and working through the night to try to catch up. I was completely off balanced and completely dysregulated. I was in so much excruciating physical pain that I couldn't get out of bed 2 to 3 days out of a week. And that's on a really, really good week at this time. So it was clear that I was really struggling and having a really hard time meeting the expectations of my sponsoring scientist. So I decided to be honest with him about what was going on for me. And he actually helped me. He helped connect me with a concierge doctor, which is basically a subscription service to a doctor, basically. And I was able to work with him to figure out what was going on for me physically. So I found out that I have hypermobility, which, if you can see, means I can put my thumb here. My elbows are double jointed. I can touch the floor with both my palms without bending my knees, things like that. If you can do these two, please be aware. So hypermobility is essentially the cartilage in my body is a little too stretchy, right? It's a little too flexible. It's more flexible than the average person, I would say. And that's all fun and games until those joints in that cartilage is also holding your skeleton together and your spine. So what was going on for me is that the joints, the vertebrae in my spine would slip out of place because of whatever reasons, how I sit, how I live, I don't know. And when a vertebrae slips out of place, the ones directly around it will freeze to try to hold that vertebrae in place. And when you have 3 segments of your spine frozen, the structure that holds your skeleton together does not have a good base. It does not have a good base. So basically, all of the muscles in my body were trying to overcompensate to hold my skeleton together, basically. And as you can imagine, this causes great pain. A lot of pain. A lot of like muscle pain, a lot of joint stiffness. It's all bad. Okay, so you really don't want your spine to be misaligned. So I started physical therapy once a week, and I was getting spinal readjustments and alignments every week. I still do the spinal adjustments every week, and I still should be doing my physical therapy. Anyways, so I was starting to improve my physical health going into winter break of 2023. But of course, since I had to miss the Christmas right after my defense, I wanted to go home for this Christmas to celebrate with my family. And I sure did. But during those couple of weeks when I was back at home, I was unable to see my physical therapist and my concierge doctor for my spinal alignments. So by the time I came back to work, my condition was worse than what it was when it started, with all the holiday festivities and all the things. But either way, at this point, I had started using a cane to walk around. So when I went into the lab and my boss saw me with the cane, he immediately pulled me into a meeting and said, I think you need to go on an official medical leave. Unpaid, mind you, unpaid medical leave. So I went on a 3-month unpaid medical leave. So from March to May, I moved in with my new partner, and I mostly focused on my health and what was going on for me. And during this time, I revisited the idea of being autistic. Dun dun. Now, why is that? Why would that come up? Weren't we just having issues with like depression and hypermobility? Why would that come up? Okay. First, I have an autistic best friend who told me in 2021, as I was writing my thesis for my PhD, told me that they had just got diagnosed and that I would be next because I am also autistic. And at that time I said, it's giving future diamond problems. It's giving future diamond problems. And indeed it was. And then there's number 2, the TikTok algorithm. Now, I fear I don't need to say much about TikTok, the algorithm. I imagine you have faced this beast before and could be why you're here right now. Anyways, I went from TikTok to YouTube to find some more information about autism, and boy, did I. I specifically was looking up autistic burnout, and I found that it exactly, like to a T, described my experience that I had been having for the greater part of 3 years at that point. And whoa, was that a shock. And perhaps you're in this research phase right now, in which case, stay tuned. And so with all this research and, reflecting on myself and my life's experiences, I decided to go ahead with the autism diagnosis path. And I began that during my medical leave. I started that process. Now, if you don't know, autism diagnosis process is a huge thing. That's in the next video. But I decided to be honest with my sponsoring scientist during this time to tell him what was going on for me when it comes to the new information that I have found out about myself. So I had begun back to work in June, which is 2 years after my fellowship has started, right? And immediately I was in trouble for not being back at like 100% at work. And that is where our miscommunications has started. So as my sponsoring scientist and I were messaging on Slack to figure out when we would meet to go over the new expectations and to see about re-ramping up into research, he called me on my cell phone. Now, for those of you who have jobs, you may also be like, why would your boss be calling you on your personal cell phone? I could not tell you. Either way, during this phone call, he reprimanded me because he was unsure of my whereabouts. Mind you, he was out of town at the time, and apparently HR had been emailing him asking him if I was back at work, like if my medical leave was over. And they were asking him, well, where's Diamond? Where is she? He's out of town, so he doesn't know. I'm not sure why he couldn't have just said that to HR, but that wasn't a good enough response for him, so he decided to call me and to reprimand me for that. I was so shocked. Like, I said I was working, but I was going to have to work from home, and I was hoping to talk to him about that, about needing to work from home potentially more in that. And I knew I was autistic, and I shared that with him. And I also shared that means I may need a little more accommodations for working because of what I know to be true. And that did not go well. And by the end of this phone call, I was fully dysregulated. I was completely in tears. I was having a panic attack, C meltdown now. All of my panic attacks have apparently been meltdowns. Anyways, I cried for the rest of the day, basically because he told me that I wasn't equipped to be a postdoc in his group anymore if the accommodations that I had said verbally over the phone were needed for me to work there. I was shocked because this is the same person that took that same crying lady to her first doctor's appointment with a new doctor after finding out, like, after living through horrible experience of so much pain. So I was really surprised that this person who used to be like have so much patience for me and have been my advocate in the past was saying that I wasn't good enough, that there was nothing he could do to allow me to continue to work in his group based on what I had said during that phone call. But basically, everything I had worked towards was crumbling in front of my eyes, and I felt really, really lost. I mean, either way, he suggested that I draft up some goals and how I intend to accomplish them in a document form to send to him. And I ended up, even with crying all day, ended up writing up a 2-page document of my ideal goals and then my potential goals and then what I would do to accomplish each of them. And I also added a little section called additional information, where I had stated that regardless of what my diagnosis will be, there are just a few things I will need to continue to work in your group. And I listed 2 to 3 days a week where I can take usual work hour time to do my physical therapy and my doctor's appointments. So basically having time off every week to do my 2 doctor's appointments. And I will make up that time. So that was number 1. So number 2 is at least 24-hour notice before in-person meetings and 12-hour notice for phone calls or video chats, unless there's a tight deadline or, we had previously discussed before. 3, that I needed very clear expectations about any written things that we put together. I needed my expectations to be written out and clarified between the 2 of us. And then lastly, I wanted to have more check-ins, like weekly check-ins to see how I was doing. So basically more meetings to check in with him to see my progress. So those are the only 4 things I had put in my additional section. Okay. Now, these may seem like a list of accommodations because they are, but I didn't use that terminology per se in this document. I just said, until I get the diagnosis to allow for official accommodations through the school, I had listed those out underneath that. So either way, I had attached this document to an email that also outlined how that impromptu phone call had harmed me. And I had outlined how I was crying for the rest of the day and I was just so dysregulated and having a meltdown because of the impromptu nature of the phone call. A quote from this email that I said is, "I don't want to sound harsh. I just want to be clear and honest as things are rapidly changing for me." Now, that did not go well. And in hindsight, I could have worded that message a little bit differently. But either way, he responded with a lengthy email that started with, "Please don't label my contacts with you as harmful. If you think that's an appropriate term for our conversation, then it is very likely that we should sunset our association promptly. I'm consistently seeking to be helpful." Red flag 3, strike 3, out. Like, don't label our contacts as harmful. Who are you to tell me anyways? He then proceeded to paste in our messages from Slack that happened shortly before the phone call, where he said, "Was this not sufficient notice for our phone call?" Now, mind you, the pasted messages has the last message from me asking, "So when are you free?" So clearly the time that we were supposed to talk had not been decided upon. It had not been designated. That was the last message I sent him 10 minutes before he called me on my cell phone. Right. Okay. So I responded with an even longer email, pasting in the same conversations and highlighting similar things that he had highlighted to show, no, this was not sufficient notice for this phone call. And again, in hindsight, I probably should not have sent this email, but I was being pretty cordial. The HR representative and the department chair was already CC'd on this email exchange. The same exchange where he had said in a later message that, let me get the quotes, that it may not be feasible for me to always comply with such requests, when referring to the list of accommodations that I had put. Not accommodations, whatever. Not official accommodations, whatever. So that whole email exchange had ended with a request for us to have a research meeting at the end of June. And this research meeting went fine. I can usually, I don't want to say BS, but BS my way into like, this is what I've done, tell the truth about that and be like, this is what I plan to do, right? So it went fine, but he said that I still wasn't performing as a postdoc in his group. That did not go well, and the reality was setting in that I may be, losing my job. I was diagnosed with autism 2 weeks later, about 2 days after my 30th birthday, and shortly after I had a meeting with my sponsoring scientist. And in this meeting, I decided once again to be open and honest with him about my recent diagnosis, and that I was going to work through disability services to get my official accommodations. However, if you've ever tried to get accommodations for a disability, you already know what I'm about to say. And clearly it did not go well. But either way, I spent the next 2 months struggling to try to prove myself to this boss in the realm of research and being a postdoc, and dealing with the fallout of being diagnosed with autism at 30 and not really having anywhere to turn. Also, I was trying to figure out my next steps when it comes to getting my accommodations through the official disability services at the university. And unfortunately, because I was not working with that therapist who was not helping, I did not have a doctor to sign off on my freshly diagnosed disability. And that made it really difficult to even start the process of trying to get accommodations at the university. So I ended up missing some fairly important postdoc responsibilities a little bit later when my partner was in the ER. And once again, and for the last time, I decided to be open and honest with my boss about that family emergency. And I guess it was the last straw. In the midst of that, I left the ER to go have a meeting with my boss. And in this meeting, I was given a 3-month notice. And I was given 2 options. Basically, I can spend those next 3 months trying to finish this project that was not related to the one in that 10-page proposal that I brought up before. Not a part of that 10-page proposal that was paying me to do that and to get it published before I leave. Now, if you know anything about publishing papers in academic journals, you know that process is longer than 3 months. For facts, if I had submitted that paper, that's granted if all the research was done and correct. If I had submitted that paper the next day after he gave me this 3-month notice, it would not have been published by the time I left 3 months later. I can tell you that for a fact. Either simply because it takes a long time to find peer reviewers to read over the paper and then to give feedback, but you have to get the feedback from those people and respond to the feedback. And that can go back and forth a couple of times before you can actually publish the paper. And this is not like typos and little things. These are major fixes that you need to do. So there was really no way. And then there was option 2, which was spend those 3 months figuring out what my next move was going to be. And with that, the expectation that he would not be able to write me a favorable recommendation for anything I do next, if that is what I had chosen to do. So, of course, I was urged to choose option 1, of course, to kiss his ass and literally try to kill myself to try to be a postdoc again. Like, literally neglect my health and wellness to try to do a job. So at this point, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but what I did know is that the project that he wanted us to get published was so far from complete. I mean, it was giving we needed to redo the entire project. And so there was no way in the time frame that I could have redone all of the calculations on the project, written that up into a manuscript, submitted that manuscript, gotten reviews for that manuscript, responded to those reviews, got the second round of reviews, and then if those were super favorable, to get that out in 3 months, it's literally impossible. So the only way to accomplish this would be taking 3 months to speed run another burnout, and that was going to cause so much more harm to my already fragile self. And for what? For a boss who wouldn't respect my boundaries and who barely made an effort to even consider about making any accommodations for me to continue working there? No, ma'am. No, ma'am. We're not doing it. And I think my final straw was getting an email from him with an ultimatum that I had to choose between option 1 or 2 by the end of that day. Again, HR and our department chair are CC'd on all of these emails. I responded and I said, this message is completely inappropriate. I'm not responding to this, and I don't want to hear from you again without any mediation present. So I didn't hear from him for the next 3 months until I got an email that said, clean out your desk. And another forwarded email about a teaching opportunity nearby. And that was the end. I had been fired. I had lost the super shiny line in my CV. I had lost the trajectory of my career path. I had really, really flopped a really huge opportunity for my career and my ultimate goal of being a professor of chemistry. And that sucked. That sucked a lot. Now, okay, so I've been fired 2.5 years into a 3-year fellowship, and I had been approved for my last year already. So I needed to find a new sponsoring scientist at a different school to agree to sponsor my work, whatever work that could be, for the last 6 months of my fellowship, essentially. And luckily, I do have a job. I'm still a postdoc. I work at a different school that's not Ivy League, but it's definitely more, it's a liberal arts school. It's definitely more up my alley if I were to still be a professor, if I am still going to be a professor. So I am doing that now. And because of the interconnectedness of like networks and who you know in every field, any job that you know, fumbling this bag was a huge L. Getting fired from this position has altered my career trajectory significantly. And I'd say that's fired. I have to completely do something new. So now if you came here just for the tea, just for the story, that's it. Thank you for listening to my random story. However, if this story sounds all too familiar to you, or you're in that aforementioned research phase because you think you might also be autistic, or you just like to hear me talk and you think I'm really cute and you want to see what else we have in common, then please stay tuned. Hey babes. So I like to take this time to formally introduce myself. My name is Diamond. I am an autistic Black lesbian and also have ADHD. I'm 30 years old. I just turned 30 last summer. I am a Cancer Sun and Moon, Libra rising. Take that into account. And I have a plethora of hobbies, but they include this list here that hopefully I have on the screen. Gaming, hanging out with my friends, because what? Friendship is magic. Remember that. Watching anime, cartoons, listening to K-pop and music in general. reading manga and webtoons, crocheting, and embroidery. So you may have noticed, if you've looked at my channel a little bit, that I have already a lot of hours of gaming content, but I have a lot more that I like to do on this channel. So in this next section, let's talk about what you can expect from the Fresh Cut Diamond channel. So what is Fresh Cut Diamond? Well, I have this really fun story that I told over on my Substack, link in the description, about the origins of that name. But basically, as a diamond is fresh cut, you can see the clarity and the brilliance within that you may not have otherwise been able to see without the crisp cuts. So I'd like to share my brilliance with clarity to you all here on my YouTube channel and various other internet spaces. So what can you expect from the Fresh Cut Diamond YouTube channel? Well, firstly, this video series that you have stumbled upon now. This is video 1 of a 3-part video series, where the first video is this one, hello. The next video is going to be on how I prepared for my diagnosis and what happened that day, to kind of give you a heads up maybe for what you may be going through. And the last video is what I'm doing now, what I've done after, what resources have I used to try to help make my life easier now that I have been diagnosed. So a little post-processing type of video. So I basically want to make videos that I think would have helped me along this process at the beginning, middle, and end. I'm still looking up tons of resources and personal accounts of people with autism to see what they say. I really learned a lot from other people's experiences, and like when I was saying a lot of the autism TikToks and things were related to me, they all actually weren't. And I think it was the few people who shared their actual experience and their inner thoughts that helped me to relate, actually. And like when I saw other Black women talking about their experiences with being autistic or being an ADHDer, those really solidified for me through the lens of a Black woman. And honestly, it's hard to find many Black ADHDers in this format, this long form educational YouTube talking head experience editing this format is hard to find for people that share a lot of my identities. Now, there are tons of great resources. I've read a ton of books, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos, and I have a few favorites. I'll show some little screenshots of my favorite YouTube videos here. So as you can see, I love all these creators. They really helped me along my journey, and watching their videos made me feel less alone and gave me like much needed information. Like I have notebooks filled with the notes that I've taken watching the videos of these folks. But there is maybe one key difference that you may notice between me and these people. Right, so I want to add a little nuance to this conversation. And not just because I'm Black, but also because I'm gay and I have a PhD, I have hypermobility, like all of these things that are not shared. Also, I'm American. Apparently, a lot of the creators who talk about autism in the very like intimate way and like educational way are typically from like Australia or the UK, which so fair. I get it. Universal healthcare, I will be getting diagnosed too, you know? However, that's not the reality that we live here in the United States. So I also wanted to provide a public account of a Black American autistic person. And so those videos are a little bit more educational, but with a lot of personal experience baked in, so you can actually see what these things mean. Now, in the other section, which I'm currently calling Fresh Cut Fun. I don't know. I like the alliteration. Either way, those are going to be the gaming content that you may be familiar with already here on my channel. I am going to continue playing games on this channel. I really love video games, but I want to highlight mobile games, puzzle adventure games, those that are, less well known. I feel like no one's really covering the mobile game sphere. And I play mobile games every single day. And I imagine many adults do. So I want to talk about mobile games and play through some of my favorite mobile games. But I also have a Switch and a Steam Deck. And so I'll eventually probably get into playing some of those games too if people are into that. But I'm going to continue to do that. So that's just going to be a separate section of my channel. And I also, in that section, want to do like a fresh cut arts situation where I keep track of my journey of engaging in my hobbies regularly. I found that my hobbies and special interests are things that keep me regulated and make life worth living, and they make life enjoyable, and I want you to enjoy your life. So I'm hoping that together we can check in with each other on the different projects we're working on and hold each other accountable for doing art in our lives every month. So that's really important to me, and that's something I want to do. Now, that is what the two main content types you'll be seeing on my channel as of now. And for what goal? For what reason, right? So, as I've already stated, we need some more eyes and ears on this autism situation. I think we need more public accounts of what people have going on, and something that seems like such a small number of people, but the numbers are growing rapidly. I'm not quoting any statistics right now, but if you are in the realm of watching autism videos, you may be aware that a lot more people are getting diagnosed with autism nowadays. There are many reasons why we can discuss later. So, of course, there's that. I want to help anyone else that is on the journey that I was for the past 3 years of trying to figure out, am I autistic? Am I not? Am I depressed? Do I got PTSD? Do I have ADHD? Who's to say? You got to figure it out on your own, and then potentially get a medical professional to confirm or deny that for you. But I'm just here to spread the word. I'm here to tell you what it's like for me. And if what I have going on is similar to what you have going on, the more you know, right? The more you know. So of course there's the simple, I would like to help any person who is in my shoes along their journey. Any person who's an adult who is about to get diagnosed with autism or thinks that they want to pursue an autism diagnosis. I would like to chat with you. Are you someone who already diagnosed with autism and you have tips and tricks you want to share, but you don't want to make a video? Please tell me, because I just want to know. I want to know how we're living. How are we coping? How are we doing this, people? And then in general, I love community. Community is everything. Community is why we're here. That's what I strongly and firmly believe. So I just want to build a community here and chat, and hopefully we can all just make each other's lives better. And so if you overlap in any of this beautiful graphic that I'm making in the future, if you find yourself in any of these intersections of identities or interests, please hit my line. Please consider being a part of the Fresh Cut crew or Fresh Cut community, because I would really like to get to know you and learn from what you have to share. Okay, so that is the general introduction of the channel and my goals for the channel. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, if I seem interesting to you, please stay tuned for my future videos. You know what to do to keep an eye on me, but one way to do that is to subscribe. You will know when I post a new video, which there'll at least be one a week. One a week for gaming and one every 2 weeks for the Fresh Cut Academia section. Again, I'm imagining you're not new to YouTube. You know where to find me. And what I'd like to leave for you, a little assignment, if you will, could you tell me what you would do in this situation? What emails you would send? Have you been in this situation, and what did you do? Do you have any other questions for me about getting diagnosed? Any other questions about this story? I'd be happy to answer and chat in the comments section of this video. And with that, thank you so much for watching to the end. I'm really excited to get to know you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.